This is the Viltrox 40mm f2.5 lens that you can get for Sony and Nikon cameras, and I'll be honest with you, this is probably one of the most interesting, affordable lenses that you can buy in 2024. Priced at just $170, this lens promises a lot for the cost, but is this going to be another case of cheap lens that you should probably avoid, or is it actually worth adding to your kit bag? Viltrox did send me this lens to review for free, but they've not seen this video before it's gone live, and they didn't ask me to change anything in this video. This video is entirely my own opinions. So inside the box you get the lens itself, a lens hood, a storage bag, which honestly at this price point surprised me because usually you never get storage bags included at this price, as well as an instruction manual and warranty card. So weighing just 167 grams, this is an incredibly lightweight and compact lens, which is perfect if you're a travel photographer or someone who just wants less heavy lenses in your kit bag and wants to have more light accessible gear. For me, this is a great addition for my kit bag. I'm really not someone that likes carrying around big, bulky lenses, so this, chuck it in the bag, and you can use this 40mm for so many different situations. When you get an affordable lens that is lightweight, you are going to compromise on the overall build materials, so this is made of plastic, and although it does feel plasticky, it still feels robust enough for everyday use. And I don't think I'd ever worry about this breaking. Let's be honest, how many lenses have you broken in the last few years? Probably not many. And if you have, well, I don't think it would matter if it was made of metal or made of plastic, to be honest. And considering this is such an affordable lens, I mean, if it breaks, just buy another one. So this lens has a 40mm focal length. Now I have to say this did take a bit of getting used to. I'm very much used to 35mm, 50mm, 24mm, those kind of focal lengths. 40mm is that kind of weird in between, but to be honest, it actually feels more like the human perspective than say a 50mm. 50mm feels a little bit tighter than what you actually see with the human eye. So actually, if you want that sort of real life perspective, I think 40mm is the way to go. And because this lens has that sort of human perspective, that makes it great for pretty much every style of photography, from portraits to landscapes to city photography. I don't think you'd really find this becoming an issue in certain scenarios. Now the lens design itself includes 6 groups and 10 elements, incorporating 1 extra low dispersion element to minimize chromatic aberration and ensure accurate color reproduction. There's also 3 high refractive elements that help to keep the lens compact while maintaining that optical performance. And there's 1 single spherical element which helps to reduce distortion. As you know, this is an f2.5 lens, and I have to say I'm not a fan of lenses that don't stop down sort of 1.8 if you're looking at getting a prime lens. But 2.5, I've got to be honest, hasn't really been an issue for me. Now, although this won't let in as much light as an f1.8 or a 1.4 lens, I've still found this to be manageable in most situations. If you are looking for a lens that gives you a real shallow depth of field and separation from the foreground and the background, then this lens may not be for you, as it doesn't quite deliver compared to an f1.8 or a 1.4 lens. And what really doesn't help is the fact that this lens has a minimum focus distance of 34 centimeters, which is quite far away. Like when you put this lens near an object, sometimes you have to step back to get the focus because you don't really think you're that close to it, but it turns out that you are and the lens just won't focus. Now if this lens had like a 20 or a 15 centimeter minimum focus distance, obviously then you'd be looking at this almost being a macro lens, but also you'd get more background separation. Whereas because we're limited by that 34 centimeter minimum focus distance, it means that we can't really get that close to sort of exaggerate that shallow depth of field even more, which would help with it being an f2.5. But as you can see from these images that I'm showing on screen taken with the lens, the f2.5 isn't really a huge issue, and we're still able to get some good depth of field there. And I think this lens gives a great smooth background blur. So the lens features an STM motor for fast and quiet autofocus, which is excellent for both photography and videography. You also get a smooth and silent focus ring, and this is particularly beneficial for video work, so you can manually focus without the sound being picked up on camera. Now what really surprised me about this lens is the minimal focus breathing. So with some lenses, you shift focus from something in the background to the foreground, and there is a noticeable shift in the composition, and this can be quite distracting. But this lens seems to kind of avoid that entirely, and when you think about the price of this lens, that is great. So if you're looking at a video lens, this may be the one. So when it comes to durability and use, we've kind of touched already on the build quality, but on the Viltrox website, they state that this thing is waterproof with an anti-fouling coating. Now, I don't know what that means, but I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't trust this in a monsoon or a sandstorm or anything where you're going to risk getting this thing, in a bad situation. There's also not any kind of seal or anything on the back where it meets the camera, so just bear that in mind. Maybe don't use this in some, real bad weather. Now, this lens does support EXIF data, so all your shooting information is preserved, and there is a Type-C interface on this so you can update the firmware. If you're planning to use this lens with filters, it does have a 52mm thread, so pretty standard, and you'll be able to find filters for this easily. So let's talk about the most important thing when it comes to any lens, and that is the image quality. And I have to tell you that this Viltrox 40mm f2.5 delivers in every way possible. And I have to be honest, I didn't expect great image quality from a lens at this price point, but it is honestly great. Just take a look at some of these shots. Now, look, I'm not saying these are great photos, I just took this lens out for a few test shots, but as you can see, this lens is super sharp, and there's barely any chromatic aberration from this lens. Now, that is something you see in cheaper lenses. Now, I think that's helped by the fact that our lowest aperture is f2.5. Usually it's when we start getting into like the 1.8s, that's when we start seeing, really exaggerated chromatic aberration. But honestly, this lens is completely free from it from my tests. So, although you may not use this for astrophotography because of the focal length, you can use this without worrying about loads of chromatic aberration and fringing in your image. The color reproduction from this lens also seems pretty accurate. Something you have to worry about with cheaper lenses is kind of cast on the image. As I mentioned before, sharpness is another strong point. This lens seems sharp from edge to edge, and the center, all of it seems sharp. So, this is crazy good for $170. You may be interested in buying this lens instead of Sony's 50mm f1.8. So I know there you've got a stop of difference with the aperture, 1.8 or 2.5 on this lens. So the 50mm, in theory, is going to be better in low light situations. That said, the autofocus on the 50mm 1.8 is atrocious, and I actually did a video on that, and I'll put it somewhere here on the video so you can watch that. But this one is super fast, reliable, the eye autofocus seems to work, all of the tracking seems to work. So if you're looking at getting a lens that may be an alternative to the 50mm f1.8, I would personally opt for this one. Because just watch that video and you'll see what I mean. I absolutely hated the 50mm 1.8's focus. It was slow, unreliable, and I would actually never buy that lens or recommend it to anyone. I've pretty much covered everything about this lens. I think it is honestly great for the price, whether or not you're starting out with a camera or you're just looking for another lens to add to the kit bag. Now, you may find a review online that does, bring up some negatives about the lens that I may have missed or I just don't really think about. And I think that's because you have to think about the price of a lens before you start giving feedback. I mean, I'm not going to look at this lens and start reviewing it as if it's a $2,000 lens, because you just can't hold it up to that kind of standard. But when you do consider the price of this and you realize that, wow, I'm getting some fantastic image quality for less than $200, then, well, I can't help but recommend it. So if you're looking to get this lens, the links are in the description, and I think in the UK you can get this for $199, which is a little bit pricier than the US equivalent, but I think that may be to do with shipping and stuff like that. So check this out, it is available to buy now. And if you enjoyed this review, be sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below if you have any questions or comments about the products, and I'll reply to them as soon as possible. And if you want to see more from me, subscribe, hit that alert button as well, and you'll be notified when I upload another video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.